Hello everybody, and thanks for tuning in to today's webinar. So for today's session, what we're going to be covering is the introduction to the brand new upgrade to the invoicing application of version 6. So as far as an agenda for today, what we're going to be covering is we're just talking about what is version 6. You might have already been using Apptivo. You heard about the V6 launch of the other apps inside of CRM. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of just at a high level what V6 is and what that means for an app as we do an upgrade. Then we'll talk about specifically on the Invoices app, or what are the most notable improvements that have come along. Then we'll dive in, an overview of all the different changes that are going to be involved. We'll just kind of talk at a very high level. And then what we'll do is we'll actually just walk through each one of the changes. We'll go back and forth, and we'll show you inside of the application, just give you a feel for what new adjustments are going to be available. And of course, further information will be coming out on our website and on our blog and such over the next upcoming weeks. So let's go ahead and let's get started with this, what is version 6? So version 6 is this brand new piece of technology. It's the new tech that all Apptivo apps are now built on top of, and it's built on top of AngularJS and Bootstrap. So that might not mean anything, just kind of some tech mumbo jumbo, but what it means to you as a user is any app that's on V6 is built with a fully responsive design. Although we are going to continue building native mobile apps, so there is a native mobile app for Android and iOS available for Invoices. The existing app will work with the brand new version. This new UI comes fully responsive. It'll have a much nicer design, look and feel with all the latest Apptivo branding, everything like that. And then it'll work across every device that you might have. So just depending on wherever you are, doesn't matter, as long as you have an internet connection, you're going to be able to get out there, create, send out invoices, and also, of course, interact with your CRM, which is also in V6. So V6 is built on this new tech. General UI improvements is going to look a little bit different, but keeps a consistent design with the existing versions. And then the next biggest item you're going to be seeing is the enhanced search and views. So just the whole ability to go and sort through invoices, create lists of invoices based on some criteria, or hunt down a particular set of invoices based on, let's say, some custom fields that you've put into the system. All of this is completely reworked, very much enhanced over the previous V4 that was available in Invoices. So if you're an existing user, you're going to instantly notice the ability to create all these lists. Very, very powerful. A lot of things that come along with that, which we're going to talk about when we go through all the individual changes. And then really this one's a very high-level improvement, but there's a ton of new configuration options available for you. So this is just a little snapshot of the different settings that you're going to have available in the app. But even this really doesn't quite fully tell the story, because if we just go look at this master layout feature, which was previously just custom attributes, this is packed full of different options that you're going to have available to go and really make Apptivo invoicing work specifically for your business. So we're actually going to spend one section just talking about what was improved within the master layout, but just in general, there are a plethora of brand new options available for you as far as making Apptivo invoices work for you. And this is based on like which region you're from, whether you need to charge some like withholding taxes, which we previously didn't have the ability to support, or whether it's just a matter of you're an enterprise organization and you need to have very granular security controls to determine who can see and edit each individual field or every button, like deleting invoices, voiding them. There's a lot more control over all the individual actions that somebody can perform inside of the system. So we'll come back into that, but when you really look at the most notable improvements inside of Apptivo, or sorry, as far as the Invoices V6 upgrade, you're really talking about these three areas, but yeah, there's a lot to be said about each one of those. So let's go ahead and let's start going through the list of just what is every single change available, and then we'll go and we'll dive into each one of these lists in a moment, and we'll actually go show you inside of the application a little bit. Although certainly we're not going to go and show the details and all the different applications that you'll have available. So we'll just go see some ideas, show you what the new UI looks like, give you a feel for it, and definitely you can expect to get some detailed guides and overview sessions on each of these features in the coming weeks. So when we look at what's improved inside of Invoices V6, we can kind of break it down into three big categories. So it starts off with just there's some features that are completely specific to Invoices. They don't really apply to other apps, or at least none of the other V6 apps that are upgraded yet. And this comes down to one which has a little bit of a deeper meaning behind it, which is the accounting rules. So one of the things with Apptivo previously is it was specifically about lead to cash and driving support, but it was never about the full financial backend. This is now changing. So you're going to hear some more news about the upcoming Ledger application, but the invoicing is now integrated in a manner where when you create an invoice based on the information you store on the invoice, like what types of items you're including, what group of business that the invoice is sent to or from, all of these can add up to how you want to go and perform the accounting for the revenue off of this invoice. So this accounting rules feature is actually a whole engine where you can define some very complex logic that determines exactly how you want your money to be moved around. And this could also just be as basic as, when I send an invoice, move the money to this account. When the invoice is paid, move the money to this account. So there's now a full accounting backend in the new Ledger application. We're not going to dive too far into that today, but definitely you're going to be hearing a lot about the accounting solution in Apptivo coming up soon. Otherwise, you have this brand new feature called delayed terms, and what this allows you to do is apply penalties to invoices that are not paid on time, in addition to also providing discounts for invoices that are paid early. So you're going to be able to write out rules like adding an additional 2% for every week that it's late, maybe an instant one-time $30 to $5 fee if it goes past the due date. There's a lot of different options you have available there, so we'll talk about those. And then we also have an improved PDF editor. There's just a couple more fields that you're going to be able to customize, and we've listed accounting rules on here twice, which obviously is not too good. So those are some features that are just specific to invoicing, and then there's just a bunch of features that they come with V6, but they are specifically included within invoicing. So there's a lot of things that you've probably been hearing about in general coming out. For the most part, what Apptivo does is we take a feature in one app and we try to bring it into being available in all the apps. So this is a list of features that are just kind of, you might have seen them already in CRM. Now they're going to be available in invoicing. They can look and feel the same way. And then there's a whole slew of updates specifically in that master layout. So we're going to dive through what each of these new attribute types and different controls and such you have available are. And this will really give you a taste for how the V6 version of Invoices is just, it's way, way beyond what it used to be as far as customization options and how you can make it work for each business. Okay, so we already kind of talked a little bit about each one of the different features inside of the special invoicing features, but let's go ahead and let's show you a little bit inside of the application and give you a feel for them. All right, so here we are. This is the brand new Invoicing V6. So right away you'll see that it looks pretty familiar as far as the way that the UI looks. Looks just like a CRM V6 app where you got your navigation on the left, your search in the upper right. And in order to get to those settings, you just click on the little More button right there, and you've got your app utilities. So we'll hop into the settings. You'll see all the different options are available right over here on the left. But then specifically, we're looking for the accounting rules. So what these are is it's a feature where I can come in, I can write a series of rules. So I could just say that this is post payments to AR. And I could do a very simple rule that just blindly applies to every single invoice. So that's what this criteria right here is. The idea is that you can write a series of rules, each one of them scored, so it'll find the rule that matches the current invoice, and then it will perform the processing that you'd like on there. So as you come down, I could write some criteria, like this is where if I had multiple divisions in my company, and based on the division, I want to post that revenue into a different account, I would be able to come in and say, okay, if the division, which I'd have to have an attribute for it, I believe I have one called invoice type in here. Then it'll just show you the values from there. So I could say if this is an invoice for an organization, maybe I have one account versus for my individual sales, I would have another account. That's one option that you might do. And you basically write the criteria to say, okay, well, if I have an invoice and the invoice type is an organization, then what I want to do is I want to move the money around in this way. So in this case, down here is where you actually write the rule, where you can create an automated rule that will post a new journal into the general ledger. So this might be a little bit more than a lot of you need. It's certainly an optional feature. You saw it comes disabled by default, but here I could come in. You'll see I can do it for each project, so I can move each line on the invoice to a different account. Lots of different little controls you can do there. Then I'd be able to take a value. So this is how you would be able to split out, let's say, the taxes versus the individual amount for items. You could split services versus items. Lots of different controls you have there. Or I could just grab the total value of the entire invoice, and then I'll just choose which account am I going to debit and which account am I going to credit. So here you can come in, you'd have a list of all the accounts inside of your organization, and you just pick where you want to move your money around. So you can keep this very simple. Just create one simple rule that would go and take money upon payment and then put it into the accounts receivable. That can be it. You could leave it completely disabled, but lots of new functionality here. We're going to go ahead and step on to the next feature, but definitely keep an eye on the accounting rules coming out. This will be a major topic over the upcoming months. Then next is delay terms. So what delay terms is we hop in here. It's under the payment section. And once again, this feature is disabled out of the box. And if we enable delay terms, oops, looks like mine doesn't want to flip on. Yeah, I might not have it configured inside of this organization. It's a very similar engine where you can write criteria. So you could say if the invoice is a certain group, and then you'll define what you want to do there. So on the delay terms, your options that are going to be available, they are either to select the days before or after invoice. So this is where you can say 10 days before it's due, I want to offer a discount, or 10 days after it's due, I can provide a penalty. And then you'll select what that quantifier is. So that could be a percentage of the total invoice value, could be a percentage of the untaxed invoice value, it could just be a flat rate that you type in, or it could be a flat rate per item. Lots of different options available there. Then next, I'll just quickly show you the PDF editor. Very similar to the master layout, which we're going to dive into in default. It just has a general UI improvement. You can still manage as many different PDF templates as you want. But what you'll see is, this is actually a hotly requested feature from before, is the ability to either just start with a completely empty layout, build it from scratch yourself, or to just take the default layout, which is what we previously offered, is you'd always start from the default and then build on top. But one really special thing we have is if you are one of those organizations who want to have a ton of different templates, you can now create one template and then copy your layout from an existing template and go modify from there. So in this case, I could just say start with the default layout, or actually I'll just hop into the editor and show you this one real fast. And in general, you should probably recognize what you could do before, but big differences are you have all of your custom attributes now available. You can also insert all of the different attributes from the related customer and contact. So this is really special, where even if you create a custom field, so like this organization type on my customer, if I wanted to just automatically show the customer's address or their type or any information that I've stored in those apps on the customer or contact, I actually have every attribute available, and I can just go drag them where I want onto the PDF template. So this is one major difference from before. We're also going to talk about the equivalent reference app field. It's a huge new improvement to the master layout. Otherwise, just in general, a nicer experience. Takes up the full size of your screen, a lot easier to come in here and edit it. And then you also have the new special JSON editor where you can get in there and you can do all the coding yourself. You can see the code that ours produces. A lot more granular control over the PDF editor. So customize notes to customer, this is nothing really too significant. Just you previously always would have to type in a different note. It would have the system default. In general, everything you see inside of the app now should be customizable. So when you hop in here, you'll just see there's a section underneath the invoice area, and you can just come in and type in whatever message you like, and then it pre-populates whenever you go and create a new invoice. So nothing too special there, but a few different features, definitely going to change the way that you experience invoicing. And then next, I want to talk about just the other general V6 features. So those features we just ran through, they're pretty specific to invoicing. We'll see them to come to some of the other financial apps. So it will come into like the work orders and estimates apps as those go into V6. But these features, these are things that if you've been using CRM, you've already experienced for some time. But they have a major impact on how you're going to be able to use invoicing because, well, they offer a lot of different options for you. So list layouts. What a list layout is it's the ability to customize what columns appear when you're getting a list of invoices. This is especially important if you are somebody who uses custom fields, or if some of the default fields in the app just don't apply to you, like you're a B2C or B2B organization, you're going to want to see different details when viewing your invoices. So now, unlike before, what you can do is whenever you're viewing a list of invoices, you will be able to have a couple different presets that would change the columns. And you can actually go field by field. Like if I just wanted to see when each invoice was created, I can come down. I can go find the created on and modified on. And when I check the boxes next to there, it actually just adds the column onto the end of the list right here. So I can do this, although it'll also allow me to go add in custom fields. So if you have added a custom attribute into Invoices, you can finally now make it appear inside of your search results. And not only that, you can actually go and search and filter on top of it too. So really everything builds around the master layout in V6, whereas previously there was a distinct difference between a standard attribute that Apptivo had out of the box versus what special custom attributes that you added yourself. With the new system, there's very little difference between a custom and a standard attribute. So when you go look at like what fields are present on an invoice, a lot of them are directly carried over from the previous version. But you'll notice that I've actually gone and I put in one custom field, this invoice type, which is not a standard option. And in this example of having Lori's photography business, I'm going to generally have invoices that are either out to individuals or to organizations, like a school photo shoot. So in that case, I can actually go and tag up my invoices as I submit them. And then at any time, I could come and I could filter. So I could say everything that is sent to an organization. And now I get that filtered list of just these 3 invoices back. Maybe for an organization invoice, what you want to do is you want to change the columns that appear. So I can actually come in, I can go show like the overall subtotal, if I've given them any sort of discount and tax, and all this stuff is resizable as well. So maybe I want to go remove a couple fields to get more room. Maybe I don't want this tags feature. And then I can come and I can just resize them a little bit. Remove space from the ones where I don't need it. Get all my information on one screen. And when you're done, you can save it as a view. So this is something you could never do before, where if you ran a search, you'd always have to keep rerunning it over and over. Maybe when you come into invoicing, you just want to have 2 options. You want to have one that shows all of your open organizational invoices and one of your open individual invoices. So you come in here, I just call this organization invoices, or we'll just call it organizations. I could share it with the others, so then my other users could also see it. And then there's a section called My Views right here. So you can now save views. They pop up here. There was a basic version of this before called Save Reports. So this replaces the Save Reports concept, but just includes a lot more functionality behind it. Okay, so list layouts, huge item. Then it's just coming down to, well, what can you now do? So you saw that we can search by custom fields and group them out. You saw custom views, but now there's still a lot more granular options available. So that comes down to like the bulk edit and the exporting, and then you also see view security as an option right here. So what that means is, one is you saw I can like create a custom view and I can choose whether to share it. But this whole navigation on the left is actually fully customizable. So really when you look at a V6 app, there's a bunch of tools that help you go and create lists of invoices and find the particular invoice that you're looking for. Then there's that detailed view, which we'll go check out in a moment, where you're actually editing one invoice, you're recording payments, adding notes to it, emailing a reminder to the customer, all those types of operations. So inside of this list right here, any list that you're looking at, you can now select them, and I can perform bulk actions. So here I could actually go, I could update them, I could print out a PDF file, or I can go and I can export this list directly to an Excel file. So that's one big improvement, is now I can just go dump out my invoices into any format that I'd like. But what you see under the bulk actions, what you see under this left navigation, this is all highly customizable now. So that view security, really it's not just the views that got a security boost. So let's just talk about the security for a moment here, where previously you only had a couple basic options. So when you added a user, you could choose whether they could view the Invoices app, whether they could create invoices, and whether they could change the settings inside of the invoices. There really wasn't that much more than that. Now the Invoices V6 version fully leverages our role-based access control. So you have all those roles, but there's a bunch of individual privileges. And now pretty much everything in the settings is going to be tied to a privilege. So for the most part, all the features in the app should be visible to anybody who can access the app and view invoices. So you'll see here like the newsfeed and the calendar, they're restricted to the view invoices privilege. But then here you can see like the create and edit one, there's one privilege just for viewing the reports. But if we go into like, let's say the views section, you'll see the same thing here. Security privilege is tied to the view invoices privilege. But you can now create your own custom security privileges and then restrict features based on that. So let's say underneath your custom views, you wanted to take one view and then specifically restrict it to maybe just one group of people. You can actually come in and create your own custom privilege and say, name it custom invoice views. And then I would be able to go in, I can assign that privilege to just the select users that I want. And anybody else would log in and they just wouldn't see that view at all. So you can actually go through a ton of different features. When you go into the reports and such, you will be able to customize them and choose exactly who would be able to access each individual item. And it even goes deeper than this. So we'll talk about field level security in just a moment, where now you can go and say that certain fields on an invoice are read-only and restricted to just this one special privilege that we created a moment ago. Lots of different new security options that are going to be available. But let's go ahead and step into the next area. So I've pretty much covered off all those. In email templates, previously you were able to go and insert attributes. So being able to just say like, oh, hi, contact name, or the name of the customer in the beginning of it, and tell them how much their invoice total was. But you weren't able to go and select any, let's say, custom fields that you had generated. So the new email template system just gives you a lot more options, where we hop in here and try to customize some templates. What you'll see is I can now insert any attribute that I have on the invoice itself. So even if I come and I can create some custom fields like that organization type, wherever I had generated, invoice type, it'll just inject that attribute right there. So then whenever you send this email template, it would include that field. Then you can also determine whether an email template should only be visible or used by like system-generated emails, notifications and such, or whether you want people to be able to send this email manually, because it could just be like a follow-up email on a late invoice payment, or it could be a standard message that you want to send out to each customer after you confirm their payment was received. So you store all those email templates, include whatever language you want, and then include whatever attributes that you might want inside of here. Okay, so another big improvement was previously in Invoices there was support for multiple currencies, but it was pretty basic, where all you had was the option to select that multiple currencies were enabled, and then when you created an invoice it would allow you to select what currency it was in. But as far as the values on the invoices and how your reporting worked, it never converted anything back for you. So it was pretty much just switching the invoice as far as saying what currency it was, but there was no functionality behind it. That all changes in V6, where now inside of the business settings, this has been available for a little while, but only functional inside of the CRM applications, where my base currency in this example business is USD, but potentially I also deal with customers in Canada. So what I can do is, okay, so yeah, it's CAD. I can select the Canadian currency. I would go type in my conversion rate there. Just doing a quick little Google search. 1.26. And then what will happen is once you update that currency conversion, it's now available inside of Invoicing. So what I can actually do is hop back into the Invoicing application. And when I come and I create a new invoice, the currency USD, I now have two options. But any sort of values, like let's say if my entire price book was inside of USD, when I select CAD, it would automatically apply that 1.26 conversion and change all the numbers for me. So that way you do only have to keep a price book in one currency, if that's what you want, and then everything will be converted for you, and when you perform any sort of reporting, the system will automatically run the conversion rates, and it will give you everything back into your base currency in the organization. So there's a little bit deeper features here where the price list feature, it's been available since before, hasn't really changed very much, but it does work with this new multi-currency where you can have one price list in USD. You can also have a price list in CAD. It doesn't have to be a direct conversion. So the system will detect whether you've selected an item with a USD price or whether it does have a price in the local currency. then it will choose to run that conversion or not for you. So lots of new support there, definitely better for international use. And then we've already talked a little bit about those security controls, and the next one's master layout. So let's just go hop into the next section, which is these master layout enhancements. And let me just go show you all the new field types. So this is going to take a few minutes just on its own, but really this is the last piece of today's session. So this is basically everything. When it comes to the V6 upgrade and what makes it special, it's all about being able to control the fields more easily. So this master layout, this is the feature that replaces custom attributes. It's your field editor. So right here you can see that I've got like this drag and drop interface. Let me go quickly bring up one existing invoice. So this is the new detailed view of an invoice. Our standard approach of having a bunch of tabs across the top with your basic activity management features. Then the overview tab has all the fields. So it's the same general concept you have here. Yeah, of course it looks a little bit different, a little bit more cleaned up. But the master layout really allows you to change this page however you'd like. So the sections, you've always been able to create your own custom sections, move them around however you'd like. But things that you can do now, well, really, there's a lot of things you can do now. So I guess let's go hop through the list one by one. So starting off with reference fields. Reference fields are very special. They're all about the integration across applications. So the example we talked about earlier, let's just take that one right now. When we look through all these fields, the idea is that there are certain what we call ref apps. The default ref app fields in invoicing are the customer and the contact, and also like an item. The idea is when you select a record from another application, that's a reference app or a reference object. So right here, the first thing I do when I complete an invoice is I fill in which customer it's for. But now that customer has a bunch of information stored about them. They've got a phone number, an email, they have a category, an address, all these details, including potentially some custom attributes that you've generated. So the concept of this ref app field is I drag it over, and when I click on it, got all the different settings, but the first thing you do is you say, well, what field am I trying to reference? So you go and you say, okay, it's whoever I selected in the customer. And then you say, well, what field do I want to display on the customer? So it would show you every field available in the customer's app. So the way that it would function is as soon as I type in the customer name, then this reference field would automatically populate with the value. So instead of having to retype it or instead of duplicating the information in two spots, it's simply a read-only field inside of Invoices that will show you that information as it currently is stored in the other app. So this is very valuable because a lot of time you have a bunch of crap that's already stored on the customer, and every time you send them an invoice, they want that information visible. Really common request before was being able to put like an ABN or a tax ID number of the customer and print that onto every invoice that you send to them. That's a requirement for some organizations. So now you can simply store that ABN number once on the customer record as a field, and then you create one of these reference fields in order to automatically store that, that information on every invoice that you send to them. So ref app fields, huge, huge improvement. The next one was functions. So invoicing has always had some basic functions built into it, but you were never able to modify them yourself or create your own custom functions. So this is like the total amount, where whenever you go and add a bunch of items onto an invoice, it's going to take the rate times the quantity that you've typed in and the tax that was applied, and it'll produce the amount for that line. Same thing down here is you just see, okay, the subtotal, add up all the different amounts that you have, okay, discount, being able to go and apply that, and what is your tax, what is the overall grand total. All of these are just formulas, and you can actually just come in and modify them. But you can actually come in and, let's say, create a custom field for sales commission. So you can actually name this whatever you want. And then you'll be able to select attributes and write a formula. So I can create a function. I can go simple or advanced. And in this case, what you just be able to say is, okay, what I want to do is take like the invoice total and then go apply a value to it. So just take whatever values you want, do multiply, minus, percentage, anything like that. And then this function field, it's read-only, just like the reference field, and it would just automatically show you what value was calculated. So you'll see that these features will start to stack together in a manner where, let's say, for example, you wanted to create a commission structure for any invoice that was issued to an organization. And then you want to be able to pull a report of how much commission you owe to each sales rep. So using the function field, you could write a formula and have it automatically calculate a percentage of the total. Then you could create a custom view that shows the column for this sales commission, and you could use the bulk export feature to be able to download all of those invoices and then output the appropriate value directly into that spreadsheet. So that way you can go total it up and do whatever work you need to do. So formula fields, tons of values there. Another just general V6 enhancement. And another one is custom attributes, or sorry, custom tables. So what these are is all of the different types of lines you can have on an invoice. So we allow you to convert from projects, from timesheets, work orders, etc. So you'll see that each one of them has their own table, which has certain attributes. And the way we've done this is we've actually constructed these tables using generic features. So now, just like Apptivo could build in a custom method to add in projects onto an invoice, you could take another application and you could go put your own custom set of information. Like, let's say I wanted to create a table of purchase orders, something like that. I could do so. Employees, contacts. The idea is that now I can have this new section up here called a table. So I drag that in. It becomes its own section. So let's just say that I wanted to say like contacts involved. Maybe it's not even a billable item. So I create that, and then I'm going to go and drag my own attributes inside of here. So you could start off with, let's say, a reference app. So the first thing I want to do is I want to search and select a contact from my contact database. So here I go create a field called contact, and then I say that it's going to be from the contacts application. And I'll show you in a second how the system will automatically go create like an autocomplete field for you. Then maybe I want to reference a couple details from the contacts. I want to show like their phone number or something. Or maybe I want to type in some custom information. Maybe I just want a quick little text box that says like a note or details. So we'll keep it really, really simple. We'll just do two fields right here. We can just give them both plenty of space. And then the idea is that I've created these two fields, a set of information that I want to store on each contact. And because it's a table section, I can add as many as I want. So at the table level, there's a couple other controls you have. So like normally when you add an invoice and you add an item, you're able to put notes in there. You can choose whether you want to remove it or not, whether they're allowed to add more rows or not, anything like that. So here you see all the different actions that are possible. So I could say, yes, I do want to allow them to add a note. It's actually a brand new feature called copy row. So I could allow them to copy each row. Maybe I just want to add 15 contacts that are very similar to each other, and like when it's visible and everything like that. So I do all these changes now, and I just hit the save button to save all my master layout changes. And now when I go and create a new invoice, we see this contacts involved, and you'll see I can just go add a new value. So automatically it pops up a search field, so I can go search my contact database. And then you'll see the different actions that we had configured. So I could add a custom note to each person, or I could copy the row, I could delete it, or you see I can just go add as many as I want. So there's really a ton of different options. We're actually going to be releasing a bunch of new articles over the coming weeks on just different applications that this will serve. But yes, huge, huge improvement of having table sections. So next couple ones, these are all details that you can control on each field. So once you dive in onto a specific field, there's a lot of things that you can do with them, other than just having new types of fields available to you. So let's hop back into the master layout, and let's go show you a little bit of this before we go ahead and wrap up the session for today. All right, so in the master layout, the way it works is we've been working off this palette. That's how I created a new field. So all the different field types I can create, I can go and I can drag one over. I can create new sections from the palette. But then when I have an existing field already generated, like let's come down to our table right here of items, I can click on a field and then it switches over to the inspector tab. So that's how I created like a field label, I named my table, and I control those actions. But each field, depending on which type you select, is going to have a bunch of different options available for you. So in this example, quantity is a number field. So there's certain controls just available to number fields. And there's certain controls available to every type of field. So for First, let's talk about just those number field specific ones, because actually like visibility and mandatory, there's some huge items inside of here. But in a number field in particular, you can now control how many decimal points it has and whether rounding is applied. So what you'll see here is quantity. I might want to have decimal points. Like some organizations do want to do 5.5 quantity. A lot of organizations just want to be able to do round numbers. So like potentially what you do is you're selling something by a length or by a weight where decimal points are perfectly valid. And in some cases, I have a physical product where it makes no sense to have a decimal point. You either get 1 or you get 2. There is no 1.5. So that's where you can just come in here. You can change the scale and precision to control how many values you can have before or after in the decimal points. So you can create whole numbers. You can force them to do short numbers. And in this case, I've allowed a couple decimal points for the quantity. And then on the head count, this is a different number field. In this case, I've got it scale 0, which means only whole numbers are going to be accepted inside of here with no rounding available. So more controls that you can apply onto each number field. But then specifically when you get into like drop-down fields and such, there's more advanced items that you can do. So let's go talk about, I guess we'll make sure we cover on each one of these items, but the default values and sort order. So whenever you create a drop-down menu, you can have a bunch of different options available in there. And when you start to have like 20 or 30 different options, a lot of the time you can speed up how quickly you're able to fill in a new invoice by selecting the proper default values for the most common scenarios. And then you can also say that like certain values are not available, they don't apply to some scenarios, and also which order that they might want to appear in. So let's hop back up to that invoice type field. This is a drop-down menu. And when I come down to the bottom of this, you'll see options behavior, predefined. I can control my different values. So I am able to like drag and drop and change the order like this. But then you'll see sorting. The order sorting is custom, meaning whichever drag and drop order you have down here is exactly how it will appear. And that's great for drop-down menus where you have like different stages in a process where you want to view them one by one. In some cases, you just have like a bunch of industries in a list. So you want the system to just automatically do an alphabetical sort for you. So that way you can just type them in whatever order you want, whatever's most convenient, add new values in the future, and don't worry about where you drop them. And you just force the system to automatically sort as A to Z or Z to A. So pretty straightforward. And then the other option is the default value. So based on which values I have configured for this dropdown, I can now just say automatically when I hit create invoice, I just want it to pop up with organization. So I go and save those, and then you just see these are slight little nuances available where when I hop onto that create invoice screen, now it automatically is selected organization, even though yes, I will be able to change it however I'd like, and then the sorting is done exactly how I had specified a moment ago. So otherwise, there's still a lot more controls that you're going to have available. So the big three are all about conditions. So this is where things get really advanced, where previously if a field existed, it always existed, shows in every scenario. Now that's not quite the case. So this is another one where really there's a ton of little options that are going to become available to you, especially when you start to pair up all these new different master layout improvements together. So let's go pick on our invoice type field again. And yeah, these examples aren't going to be too great because we only have a couple values, but let me at least go ahead and show you through. So first is visibility. And one very simple thing is you can now create hidden fields. So they'll exist, the information is present, but nobody can view them. So, okay, visible, most of your fields are going to be visible on. I could just toggle it off. This is great if, like, let's say you're working on a new field, you don't want to just show it to everybody yet, or you want to disable something but not delete the data. Or a little bit of a better approach is maybe you only want a field to be visible sometimes. So we've got this scenario where we have some invoices for individuals and some invoices for organizations. There might be some information that's relevant when I send an invoice to an organization, like that ABN number, and then some information that's only relevant when I'm sending to an individual. So in that case, what I can do is I can set the visibility to conditional. So I say, yes, it's visible, but it's conditional. Now I'm going to write the rule that says, when should this field be visible? And the rule is going to be based on the current state of other attributes. So what I can do is I can come up there and I can say I only want this attribute to be visible in some conditions. So in this case, I might not want to control whether the invoice type is visible. I'd probably say the invoice type is always going to be visible. But then further down here, I've got this section of services included. Maybe when I'm dealing with individuals, the quantity is always the head count. So like, let's just say that I'm sell packages to organizations of like up to 500, up to 1,000. But when I charge an individual, I just say, okay, it's you, or it's a family of 4. My quantity is 4. So maybe this head count field should only be visible when the invoice type is for an organization. That's a scenario that you might do. So here I would say it's visible, but it's conditional. The driving attribute is our invoice type, and I only want this to be visible when the value is set to organization. So let's go ahead, let's save that, and let me show you how this works. So now I come in, I create a new invoice. We scroll down, services included. We see quantity, our head count is still there. Oh, it's because we are defaulted to organization, wherever invoice type is. Of course, I made invoice type hidden a minute ago. So this is where, yes, even if the field is not visible, it will still play into all the functionality everywhere. So we want to hop back into invoice type. It's not conditional, it's always visible. All right, so now you can see invoice type is set to organization. A head count is available. But if I were to say that this is an invoice to an individual, now the head count's not visible right there. So yes, it will still hold an area if you're doing a custom table section. If it was a field up here, it would just completely disappear. Like, so let's say if I wanted to apply that to email ID, I could. But then otherwise, it'll just detect that scenario and then choose whether to show the field or not. The other similar feature is going to be value restrictions. So this specifically only applies when you're dealing with a drop-down menu. And what it allows you to say is certain values inside of a drop-down menu are only visible in certain conditions. So an example of this would be, let's say if you're dealing with a real estate invoice. If I select a drop-down that says commercial or residential, very similar to this individual or organization, then I have another drop-down that says type of property. So let's go ahead and do that. And the type of property, I mean, if it's a residential, it could be single-family house, a condo. If it's commercial, it could be a warehouse or a retail storefront. So what I want to do is I want to have a single drop-down called property type, but I only want to show the relevant values based on whether it's residential or commercial property. So that's where I'm going to come in and I'm going to start building out a form using all these tools. So first I'd say property type. Got my 2 values. I've got residential, commercial. So I want this field to be always visible. Maybe I go select the default value and such. But then I have my second drop-down of, oh, oops, sorry. So my second drop-down is actually property type. This would be called a customer type. So I've got a commercial or residential customer. Then I have my property type, which is what kind of building is it in. So this is where I might have a bunch of different values: single-family home, condo, warehouse, retail storefront. So I've got a single drop-down, but then what I want to say is property type, it has value restrictions. So right here, value restriction, by default, it says, no, show every value in any scenario. But you could say it's actually conditional. I'm going to change my values based on the customer type field. And I only want, when residential is selected, I only want these values to be selectable. So if residential is selected, I want single family home and condo. But what you can do is you can get a little bit more complex here. So there's what's called sets and groups. This same logic actually applies to like the accounting rules before. It's just a little bit more advanced workflow automation. So in here I could say that I'm going to have 2 different groups that are considered valid scenarios. Basically what you're doing is you're saying, if I have one scenario right here, customer type residential, it must be set to one of these values. Or I can have a second group. So I can call this residential, the residential group. And I could say or I could demand that both of them are true. So in this case, I would say, or the customer type is set to commercial, and one of the values is warehouse or retail storefront. So now what I've done is I've split the two out, and I've said two legitimate scenarios, and the system will force you to meet one of these two scenarios. So we go ahead and we save that attribute. Now when we come in, we have our property type and customer type. Property type is empty because nothing is valid. You select residential. Now you see the two values that are considered valid in that scenario. You select commercial, and now you get the two different values. So you can see now that you could play with all the visibility controls here, and you could say if it's commercial, I have 3 shared fields that are the same no matter what kind of property I have, but they have different value restrictions. And then I have 3 fields that are only visible when it's a commercial customer and 3 fields that are only visible when it's a residential customer. So you can get into all those sorts of different workings, and then you could even change formulas based on whether it's residential or commercial, all these different things you can do. So you could have like one commission field for residential, one for commercial, each with a different formula built right into it. Okay, so we spent a few minutes on that one because that is absolutely a huge feature. And then there's what's called the mandatory conditions. It's really the same concept, but as you see, yes, you can choose whether a field is mandatory or not, but you can also write rules to say that a field is only mandatory in certain situations. Like if I have a commercial property, I must select a property type. So in that case, I say it's mandatory, but it's only mandatory in the condition where my customer type is set to commercial. So then what you see is I would be able to just create an invoice if I don't select the proper customer type or anything. It's not mandatory, but as soon as I go commercial, well, now I have to select one of the available property types that I've configured. Okay, so brand new conditions, huge improvement, and then just a couple other little things that you can do. So this is all about kind of security and controls over what's available inside of the system. So let's spend the last couple minutes just running through that stuff. All right, so each field, coming along with the security. So you saw, okay, we can type privileges to features and to reports and such and to views that people can see. I can also pick a specific field and I can control the security over that. So you'll see in search, you can control whether it's visible in search, and I could say that only certain types of users could search for it. So I could say that, yep, only the people who have that custom invoices views privilege would be able to see this inside of the advanced search menu. And then you can say, well, when you're running a search, you have to specify it or you don't. And I could also default values as they appear inside of the search results. Little controls right there. And then there is now function security. So one thing that did exist before is you could select a section of fields and you could apply function security and say it's like either read-only or editable by a certain privilege. But now we've just expanded that where instead of doing an entire section of fields, you can actually pick one individual field and you can go apply function security. So by that, I could say that anybody can go and put it in on the create page and anybody can view the value. But if you want to edit an existing record and change the value on that one, then you must have a special security privilege. So other than the security over individual fields, there's also one more big area on security that I want to show you to wrap this all up, and that's called actions. So here underneath security, yeah, some new improvements. It'll show you all the roles and privileges just relevant to the app, but the big one is actions. And this is basically all the little blue buttons as far as like bulk editing or displaying or searching or deleting or exporting or any of that stuff. You can now control exactly who can do that. Or you could just shut it off entirely. So one really common thing, which isn't even a security item, but it's very advantageous here, is when I hit create, I get all the different creation options. That's great if your organization uses every one of these options, but a lot of groups won't ever use work orders, or they won't ever use projects. You'll just have one of these. So what you'd like to be able to do is just kind of clean up and remove the extra clutter. And actions are perfectly usable in that way, where I come in, and I can just go shut off the different available options. So I could say that I'm only going to use a couple of these, I just want to keep it simple, and shut them off. But you'll see there's a bunch of different options, like whether you can go to reports, whether you can go to search, whether you can archive. Pretty much every action you can perform inside of the app is visible right there. And then you'll just see that you can go and shut stuff off and clean it up based on the user who's currently logged in. Okay, so ran through a lot today. As we mentioned, definitely keep an eye out for future updates, but hope you all found this to be useful. Those are all the brand new features that you're going to get in the Invoices V6, so definitely stay tuned as far as getting your business upgraded. But otherwise, thanks for attending, and we'll catch